I don't think we've had an episode this season that has been packed with this many character beats, character moments, character motivations, and just information that has been just thrown at us. But here we are, latest episode of Tulsa King called Warr Acres, and I'm giving my thoughts and reactions right after the jump. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. A little bit behind this week. I hope people are giving me grace because of the holidays, family time. So happy holidays, happy New Year, Merry Christmas to everybody out there. But that is why I'm a bit behind on this one because this dropped on Christmas Eve. I'm drunk with eggnog at that point. But let's get to it. We got a doozy of an episode. They give us a lot of information on this episode. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. There's one thing that I'll get on at the end that for me just doesn't feel earned. It works for what the story that they're trying to tell, but because it was all kind of smushed into this one episode, it doesn't quite feel earned. And I'm sure if you've seen the episode, you know what I'm talking about. So we pick up at the end of last episode where Mitch and Dwight have just taken out Carson Pike and they're disposing of his bodies. Before they do, they've dug a grave. It's in the middle of the night. No one's really seeing them. Before they do, Dwight wants them to take off the jacket that Carson wore. Take off the jacket and they bury him. And we all know where that's going to go. He's going to send a note, but that's where he holds on to the jacket. We then get the first scene of what I believe is trying to be the arc for Chicky in this episode. Chicky he's sitting by his dad's bedside, Pete, when Pete's getting a Zoom call from his doctor saying that, hey, you're in good health. Everything's fine. As long as you stay away from cigars, you should be here for another 10 to 15 years. You're going to be all right. And the look on Chicky's face is that of disappointment, anger, and disgust. And we also sort of learn later that it is more of the weight of the world is feeling like it's continuing to be laid on his body if his father remains alive. We learn that as the episode goes along. Dwight then receives a call from Tina, who she's been trying to call him for a bit. He hasn't been answering his phone. This is because he was out all night doing the burying. But she finally gets in contact with him, and at that point, she lets him know that Emery was attacked. And then, he goes through the questions of like, hey, where was it? What exactly happened? Was his wallet taken? Which it was not. So that lets him know that, hey, this wasn't a robbery, like a happenstance that Tina sort of is trying to play with, but she knows what's really going on. But she wants Dwight to sort of tell her what's going on. She doesn't want to beat around the bush. But it's at that point that Dwight says, hey, I need you, your family, my sister, I need you all to go ahead and move out to Oklahoma. And she's like, I'm sorry, what? He's like, yeah, I need you guys to move out to Oklahoma. For him, that's his way of like, I need my family in-house so I can protect them. It's hard, like I mentioned before, it's hard for him to do both worlds, where his family's in danger back in New York, but he's creating a business and creating a life for himself in Oklahoma. So he's asking her to come out that way. She's like, nah, until you tell me exactly what's going on, because he knows this is probably Chicky. He doesn't have for 100% sure, but he has a pretty good idea. But she's like, if you don't tell me what's going on, then I'm not going anywhere. And he's like, okay, cool. That's what you want to do. She's like, keep your damn phone on. When I call you, I need you to answer the phone. Goody is arriving. He went by train. He wasn't getting on a plane. He felt the most comfortable getting on a train. So he meets Armand and Tony at the train station. He gets there. He sees Tony, all right, black dude, but he sees Armand, and that's the biggest red flag for him because Armand and he go back. He's, what the hell are you doing here? And Armand's like, it's cool. I just happen to be here by chance. I'm working for Dwight now. And and Goody's like, okay. Armand tries to pat down Goody, and Goody's like, no. The reason why I didn't get on a plane in the first place is because I wasn't going through all security, so you're not about to pat me down. And so he knows that he has a gun on him. So Armand chooses to do, I'm going to sit behind you in case you try any funny business. So Armand sits in the back, Goody sits in the passenger, and Tony drives. This whole trip is really a way of Goody sort of just filling out the operation, seeing what's what, who does where. He's asking questions like, how far are we away? He's just trying to figure out how everything that Dwight has set up works. He also clocks that Tony is wearing a pinky ring. He asks him how much it is. He clocks that for something that comes back later in the episode, but he's just kind of getting a lay of the land and seeing what is what. Our next big sequence is we see Waltrip kind of upset that he can't reach out to Pike. He's calling, he's been going straight to voicemail. He has no idea where he's at. He hasn't responded back. His whole goal was to just have a warning shot sent to Dwight and Mitch. Put up a couple of shots and just kind of say, hey, this is our territory. Be on the up and up. Fortunately, when you take a gun to a gunfight, there's a chance you get shot. And so he is now responsible for his number two, Carson, dying. He doesn't know it yet. So Roxy comes in and he's like, hey, Roxy, have you seen Carson? She's like, no, he didn't come home last night. But she's carrying a box from outside. They open up the box, and the box is, you guessed it, it is the jacket of Carson's with bullet holes and blood sent from Dwight. Sort of as a message across the bow, like, hey, we took out your man, and he's gone. Roxy clearly was in an actual relationship with Carson. While she is an informant for Stacy, she was completely in a relationship with him. So she loses it. She starts flipping out, crying, and going off. Walter passes like, hey, remove her to get her out of there, remove her from this. This is sort of where I'm going to kind of split into three. Story, this episode goes into kind of following three separate situations. So I'm going to take them and follow them to their end on each before coming back to the next one. So yes, this is not as linear as it normally is. There's just so much going on. But Roxy gets escorted out. As Roxy gets escorted out, she calls Stacy frantically, crying and saying what's going on. She's like, hey, they killed Carson. They went over to the bar with Mitch and that mafia guy, and they killed him. Stacy knows, like, shit. The walls are closing in on her. She can feel that threat of whatever Dwight is getting into is directly affecting her, and she's starting to feel it. So she gets into self-preservation mode. This is something that is, unfortunately, as much as she likes to call out Dwight on some things, she is just as bad as he is. So she tells Roxy, "Okay, meet me at this place at 4:30." They meet up, and she coerces Roxy into going back into there to get some more information. She says, hey, keep all this stuff to yourself. Keep what's happening to Carson, all that in-house. But I need you to go do me a favor. She's like, I don't think I have anything else. It's like, and then Roxy remembers that, oh, they were looking at bank stuff. Carson and Waltrip were looking at bank stuff. I think I may be able to get that. So she's like, that's it. That's the ticket. Go get that stuff. And Roxy's hesitant, like, no, I don't want to do that. This is where Stacy starts playing the guilt trip and sort of using the heartstrings to get her to do what she wants to be done. Because all Stacy cares about, she doesn't care about Roxy's life. She just cares about, hey, I need this to shut up and close out so we can close this case and get away from it before it becomes the Dwight and Freddie case. She says, hey, they chose to send Carson over there to send the warning shot. This is on Waltrip. Waltrip is responsible. She's also taking the blame from Dwight so that Roxy's not waving the red flag about Dwight. But she's like, you should do this for Carson. Sort of laying that guilt trip, laying it on heavy, pulling at the heartstrings. And it works. She's like, okay, cool. When you get the information, I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 at the diner, and we'll meet up there. The next day, Roxy goes to the office of Waltrip to look around. She's opening up cabinets, she's looking for the laptop. She finds a laptop and she begins typing it in. In the cool little shot of the episode, there's a shot of Roxy at the table with the computer typing. And then in the foreground, that's her. In the background, you can see Waltrip coming in quietly, closing the door, unbeknownst to her. And then he says, hey, checking your email. At that point, Waltrip, I think, has already sort of made up his mind. But I do think he sort of gives her an olive branch in the scene to sort of say, hey, what are you doing? Let me know what exactly is going on. And he's playing a bit of cat and mouse. At this point, Roxy's frantic. She is freaking out. She's already a person that even if she was going to do this correctly, this wasn't the time to do it because she's still not in a good state. But she's also nervous and frantic. And Waltrip is sort of asking her about things. And he lays out a proposition for her. It says, hey, your man's gone now, and I've been lonely. How about you be my companion, my girl, my right hand, and we'll rule this world together. And she quickly, on the dime, says, yeah, I'll be your number one. I'll do whatever it is you need me to do. I feel like in that, he had already made up his mind for the most part, but I feel like in that you just gave him the okay to like, oh yeah, she's a rat. She'll flip whatever is best for her and her self-preservation. She will do so at a moment's notice. And I don't know who she's working for, but she's definitely not fully invested in this team, because there's no way that right after your guy, the guy that you were frantically losing your mind about, the second that he dies, you would immediately be like, cool, let me go hop into bed with this person. There's something up with that. And so he has a knife that he has with a rope around it. She's like, are you going to stab me? And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that, which he's not lying. He wasn't going to do that. But he does take the rope, put it around her neck, and chokes her out. Again, like I said, I think the second he entered that door and saw her there, his intentions was to kill her. But I think she gave him a little bit more of an impetus, saying like she quickly flips and hops from whatever works best for her to kind of get out of the situation. This is not somebody that can be trusted. The next day at the diner, Stacy calls the phone after waiting for a bit, and she gets met with Waltrip's voice. And Waltrip's like, "Well, who are you expecting on this?" And that Waltrip knows that that's Stacy. He knows that voice. He knows her. And he knows that, okay, cool. I'm aware now that you were watching this and she was an informant. Got it. In that, Stacy feels that she has been completely and totally at fault for the death of Roxy. In an earlier scene, she went to Dwight and checked him, said that you get Carson Pike killed, yelling at the top of her lungs. She's drunk as a skunk. And Dwight's pretty calm in that. It's like, how dare you come to my house and make these accusations, and then you tell me that she's an informant? Like, what is that information at for me? And she yells at him and says, you fucked up my life. Now, what's interesting in this and about this in this whole situation is that she did a lot of this damage herself. She is a very toxic and very detrimental to herself person. As much as she wants to put the blame on Dwight, she's at fault here too. And I think they are two peas of the same pod, but I think the difference is Dwight's a little bit more understanding of who and what he is, and he's accepted that, so he doesn't have to self-medicate the way that Stacy does. She is not willing to accept that she is willing to put people in danger, put her life, her own self in danger for whatever works and helps her out. And to cope with that, because she's not as willingly accepting it as Dwight is, she drinks and overly drinks. That's sort of the end of the Stacy aspect of this episode. Goody gets dropped off at the bar and meets up with Dwight. Dwight immediately checks him about the call he had earlier with Tina about Emery being beat up. And he's like, are you responsible for this? And he's like, no, I didn't. And then he asks him, did he know about Nico and Tina? He's like, nope. Hand to my mom's eyes. I swear, if I had known, I would have taken him out myself. And at that point, Dwight sees in his eyes, sees that he's genuine enough, and like, okay, cool. So they go have him drink. He starts questioning about, like, is the bar there? And he's like, yeah, this is ours. Me and this guy here, Mitch. And so at that point, Goody starts offering some ideas, like, hey, we should put some flamingos, some dancers in here. We should do all this. I mean, you got a lot of balls coming up in here telling me what I'm going to do with my business. But I think this is also just a way for Goody to sort of get information without making it seem like he's just asking every single question to get information. He's trying to see how big this operation has gone and what it is, what's all entailed in it. So then it splits off into more of the tricky aspect of it. And this is where this episode sort of starts having a bit of a problem with me. But Goody calls to give information back to Pete and Jake. In that, they're on speakerphone. He calls and says, hey, real quick first, before we get on anything else, did you guys hear about Emery? Did you have anything to do with that? Jake completely dismisses. Like, nope, had nothing to do with it. Don't know what you're talking about. Moving on. What's going on with the business? And then he just lets on it like, hey, this is a ragtag. This is a wild operation he's got going on. He's got a black dude. He's got Armand's down here. They're like, wait, Armand? Like, wait, what? And he said, yeah, it just happens to be happenstance. He just happens to live here. And he said that I call bullshit. But they let that go. It's like he's getting his weed from Native Americans. He's got a cowboy behind the bars. Like, this is just a village people of just operation and people he has on his team. But the main thing that sort of comes out of this is that he lets them know that Tony is wearing the ring that Pete gave him for the family. And Pete sort of gets upset and starts flipping out a little bit like, wait, what? He's like, he didn't have that ring on when he came to New York. He gave it to this dude. He's flipping out. It calms down a little bit. It's like, well, how's the money going? How's the operation? Like, no, he's making money hand over fist. Like, this is all working. The problem is it's working so well that he's a man on his own out here. We're not going to be able to control him much longer. And so that sort of just ruminates in Chicky's head a little bit. As we continue on, though, we start getting a side story of Chicky that just doesn't seem genuine or did not seem earned. I wish that they had sprinkled some of this self doubt about being in the family in earlier episodes. It would have made more sense if they had done so. Because now we just get it all in this one episode, and it just doesn't feel genuine. So what we get is he starts to question himself. There's a whole sequence with the priest that just comes out of left field for me. I don't know if other people had seen some of the tidbits for me. For me, I'd always seen a power struggle between he and his father, like who was the one that was truly running the business. And then when he gets smacked in the face, and he's like, "Oh, Dwight was a better man than you." I could tell there was a power struggle happening. But to say that he's ever felt that, hey, I don't want to do this, or I wasn't felt for this, just didn't ring true until we get it verbally written on screen for us. So he's talking with the priest. Chicky's just telling the priest, like, I feel like life is too much. I feel like this big burden has always been on me. I wanted to be a real man. I wanted to be a regular, everyday person. I want to go to college. And he's like, heard your father spent up your college fund. He's like, he took my college fund, he took my soul. Everything that I wanted to be as a human was taken away from my dad. We verbally get that, but nothing up before this felt like that was accurate. But okay. But then we get a story where he said he told there was an apple cart when he was young and he was hanging out with his dad. His dad said, "Go take an apple from the apple cart." And he's like, "I don't want to." He's like, "Go take one from it." He does. And he's like, "Well, you can take one because no one's going to say anything to a kid." The priest asked him, like, "Does anybody say anything?" He's like, "Nope, no one said anything." But he told his mother. And his mother rode his dad for a couple of days hard about that. And his dad, he says, "I don't think my dad ever forgave me about that." He's always felt this burden that he's had to prove something to his father, and he doesn't feel like he's ever done so. And now he's sort of in this power struggle, being the made man and being continuing his footsteps, even though it's not something he truly wants to do. Sure, I'll buy it, I guess. I mean, nothing before this felt that way, but okay. So then we have a sequence where Pete is being bathed by Chicky, and they get into a conversation, and Pete's like, "My dad never did this for me. My dad wanted me to be a construction worker, I believe, and he was really disappointed when I went into the business. He was like, "Well, why didn't you ever let me do what I wanted to do, like live a regular thing?" He's kind of being very dismissive and saying, "Hey, you got a big house, you got a pool, you got cars, you got women. Like, what? Why are you always whine, crying, and all this stuff?" And he's like, "You're practically running the business yourself. Like, you're good. Like, I'm not going to be here for much longer." And that chick, he's like, "Well, I'm practically running, but sometimes it doesn't feel like I am." And he's like, "What the hell does that mean?" He's like, "The other day you said that Dwight was a better man than me." And it's at that point, whatever is going on in his head, whatever ruminations he's having between not wanting to do this and wanting to do this and not feeling good enough for his father, he snaps and he drowns his dad. He kills Pete. And he stares in the mirror for a minute, and his hair is disheveled. And this is sort of his moment where he flips from being that guy who was looking for that regular life, so they tell us on script, but is now fully invested in. Like he's on the deep end now. Comes down the next scene. He's in full Lex Luthor mode. He's taking his wig off. He's bald, and he's ready about that life. Capo comes up. It's like, "What do we do next?" The man says, "We're gonna fix this damn. We're gonna straighten up this family." And so that's sort of his way to. I'm gonna clean up the things that my dad didn't do. So in this one episode, we are led to believe that Chicky wanted to be a regular guy, wanted to go to college, wanted to do a regular thing, was sort of pushed into this life, and now has had to make a choice as to whether or not to continue on and go further down that hole. And he's wound up going further down that hole. I don't have a big problem with it overall, but I just think that if we're going to do that at some time earlier in the episode, we need to see a point where he's reading a bunch of books, where he's like a learned man. He's like, "I'm reading books," like, and he just even an off the cuff line was like, "Hey, yeah, this was one of my favorite books when I was younger. I thought about going into college because of this book," or him looking at a university and kind of like something that ties him to the ability to say, "Hey, I want to do regular stuff." We don't get that from everything up to this point. Looks like he's fully invested in this life until he's not. Until the purposes of this episode say that he's not. And so the main goal was to get Pete off and sort of a cleaner way to kind of say, "Hey, he didn't want to do that, so this is why he's against his dad." Those threads should have been put a little bit earlier. Tina receives another call, another quiet call from Chicky. You know who it is. But she receives another quiet call, and this time she stays on the whole time and says, "Hey, who is this?" and they eventually hang up, and she just pulls the phone out the wall. She's genuinely upset. And based on the conversation that she sort of had with her dad, she kind of sees how this is going. So the next thing we see her with her, she's with Emery in the hospital bed, and Emery's being a little bit cold to her because I think he knows that yes, this he's going to treat this and act as this is a random act of violence that has occurred to him, but he knows what this is. I'm sure that it doesn't seem like they have any lies between them. I'm sure that Tina told him that the situation that I had with Nico has been handled by my father. But in this conversation, they're having a combo, and she's like, "Hey, we should probably move." And he's like, "Wait, to Tribeca? We said that's not where we're going to go." It's like, "No, we should probably go to Oklahoma." And it's fascinating because as much as she is estranged from her dad did something that no other man handled for her. He took Nico out. And I'm sure she has told Nico, she's sure she has told Emery about Nico, but Emery wasn't the type of person to go and handle that situation. So now she has a bit of a soft spot for her dad. So she's kind of thinking, like, maybe I should go to Oklahoma. Maybe he would take care of me. Maybe he would handle this or fix whatever's happening for me, this mess that he kind of has brought on himself. Maybe he will handle that for me. She brings it up to Emery, and Emery shuts the Oklahoma thing down. It's like, hey, look, we were in therapy for multiple years talking about how much you didn't want to be around your gangster father, and now you want to go live up under his thumb in Oklahoma, whatever world he's created there. It's like that doesn't make sense. She begrudgingly sort of acquiesces. She agrees. She's like, okay, cool, but you can tell that she's starting to kind of lean like he might be the best option for this, and it's not totally wrong for me to want to be with him. There are two other sequences that kind of happen before we get to the final scene of this. One of them is that Margaret, the stable owner, asks Dwight out on a date, and in the date, it's going well. I think the difference between Dwight and Stacy, where they were both sort of the same, but like these just two fireballs kind of coming at each other. These two have approached this as if they are just inquisitive about each other. And they're going back and forth. We learned that Margaret was married once for 9 years, but she plans to never get married again. She kind of divulges some more things about herself. And then she asks, like, hey, Dwight, this is now your time to go ahead and divulge some things about you. And he does. He mentions his daughter. And he's like, hey, we were estranged for a while, but I think we're starting to get more on the upper foot. Probably I'm feeling that way more than she is. Where it gets interesting, though, is when they get to talk about Veal and how much he enjoys this Veal. So that's good for Oklahoma. He's like, well, truth be told, everything's going to be good to me because I was in prison for 25 years. And she just starts sipping some wine. She doesn't ask questions. The look doesn't look like fear, like she's afraid of what's happening, but it also doesn't look like she's like, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to offend him and ask questions that he may think are odd, weird, or offensive. But he leads in and says, hey, you're not going to ask me what happened? And she said, I can Google it. He's like, well, I'm going to save you the time. And so this is the first time that we hear the story from Dwight's perspective and what exactly happened. We were always led to believe that he killed somebody in the name of Pete and the family. Like, hey, he took somebody out. What it sounds like is that there was a mercy killing. He was in a situation where there was a fire happening and the person that was there was trapped. There was no way that they were going to get out and they were going to be burned alive. So he killed them to sort of give them the ability to go peacefully without being burned and feeling all that pain. But even as the made man with his gun being registered, all of that comes in. No matter what he says, that's going to feel like a hit, and he's going to go to prison for it. So we learn that as bad and as brutal as Dwight can be, the situation that put him there he wasn't super violent in that. It kind of gives you a little bit more to root for Dwight, because all the things that Dwight does in this entire series has been like, he's truly a villain. Like he kills people, he's doing money laundering, drugs, and all this. But this sort of gives you a little bit more of like, he's not a completely terrible person, and kind of gives you a little bit more reason to root for him in all of this. But the biggest thing is that doesn't shake Margaret. She's not scared off at all. In fact, she comes back with a question that was like, hey, what does that feel like? To take a man's life? And Dwight said, well, I definitely was not expecting that follow-up question from you. The other piece that happens before we get to the end is Bodie. Bodie returns back to the weed dispensary to see the place on the shovel from what the FBI folks did. But he immediately goes to the back and he unscrews a screw in the back to get a pen drive. A pen drive that only he knew about, because if Dwight and Mitch knew, they would have taken that out and put that in the duffel bag. And we see a sequence of him on a computer looking up stuff, getting all techno and all that good stuff. We learn later what exactly that was. Dwight shows up to kind of meet with Bodie. Bodie asks him, like, there's a lot of cash that was in the safe that was not in the duffel bags that you brought. He's like, yeah, I was going to get on that. And so Dwight has another idea or scheme, and Bodie's like, cool, let's hear another one of these schemes that you got. In that, Dwight is saying, hey, Mitch and I are going to do some stuff with the bar. We're thinking about putting a casino in the back. And it's a good way to just bring in consistent money without really doing anything. And Bodie's like, well, it's also a good way to launder money. Dwight's like, you got it. Bingo. You're a smart man, you. And he says, we're going to need some of that cash to sort of grease the wheels of some of our Native Americans. So Native American land, but we're going to put the casino license in the Native American name. That way we can get cleared a lot faster. And Bodie's like, okay, all right, that makes sense. And then he asks him, hey, have you ever heard of NFTs or Bitcoin? And Dwight's like, heard of it, but I don't believe it's not real money. I don't believe anything that you can't tangibly touch, taste, or put ketchup on. Sure. And Bodie's like, well, I don't know about the putting ketchup on, but it is very much real. And you are not the only criminal in this enterprise. While I am not actively in Bitcoin or sharing Bitcoin, I am stealing Bitcoin from tons of people. And he turns around his computer to show how much money he has in this versus what he's sort of put in. And Dwight's like, wait, is this real? And it's just, for him, another stream of revenue that they have, that they come together and can make things done a little bit more cleanly than always having to like go at the nitrous folks and do these. He's got operations and balls in the air that can happen a little bit more cleanly for him. The final scene is Goody's supposed to have taken off. Goody's supposed to be gone, and Dwight comes to the bar, and Goody is still there. Dwight asks him, like, what's going on? I thought you were taking off. And Goody says, hey, he's got a call. Pete's had a heart attack. And Dwight is contemplating. His brain is probably like, okay, hold on. It doesn't necessarily mean he's dead. He's up there in age, but heart attack doesn't mean he's dead. So he asks, like, is he dead? And Goody's like, yeah, he's gone. I'm sorry. Because for Dwight, that was like a brother. Even though there's some things that needed to be said and worked out, that was like a brother for him. He also knows that if Pete's gone, the floodgates are open for what's going to happen to Tina and to him. That bridge or that barricade that he had is now gone. Goody says, hey, the funeral is going to be here and here, such and such time. Dwight says, I'm not going to go. And he's like, well, totally your choice, but you know that's going to rub people the wrong way. And that is how the episode is. It is 100% going to rub people the wrong way. It's going to be disrespectful. I think the big thing that's going to happen, that family overall respects Pete and respects his legacy and respects that he believed Dwight to be his brother. And so as long as Dwight reciprocates that love, I think he sort of had a protection outside of Chicky. The problem is if he doesn't show up to that funeral, and if Chicky brings up the fact that the ring that Pete gave Dwight is now being worn by the black dude, by Tony, it's going to rub folks the wrong way. And I think it's going to be easier to get those folks to turn on Pete's word, turn on Dwight, and kind of go after him. Except for probably Goody, because Goody kind of knows what actually is in Dwight's heart, what he was actually trying to do. Stacey's a loose cannon. I think Stacey's going to come guns blazing after him because now she's feeling the grasp of whatever she can to get out of this before Dwight's name gets attached to her. She feels it basically being gone. She's also responsible for the death of Roxy, and we'll see how that guilt weighs versus her conscience versus her self-preserving and getting by and getting to that pension. I think what sucks Unfortunately, I feel like Margaret is the only person who kind of understands and sort of that heartbeat for Dwight is giving him a hope for a relationship. I don't think she's long for this world. I feel like Margaret is unfortunately going to get tied into all this muck that's happening with this triangle of danger that is coming after Dwight. This triangulation between Stacy and the ATF, between Waltrip and the Black Adam gang, and between Chicky and the mafia back home. He's got to find a way to get Tina to him because he can't take care of two homes at the same time. So all in all, a good episode. It's just the one thing that really did not sit well with me is that this rise and fall of Chicky, all in this one episode, could have been better spread out to make it a little bit more tangible for me to accept. But I'm okay with it. It's where we need to go with the story, so fine. I just wish we could have got there a little bit cleaner. Other than that, good episode. I am excited to see how this all sort of unfolds because I think that the screws are starting to tighten on Dwight, and there are more people coming after him. I think he's going to have to figure out a crew because the people that he has, and you see a little bit in the clips that are coming, the crew that he has aren't fighters. They're not, but he needs to teach them to be so because everybody else that's coming after him, they all got guns. And right now, he and Mitch are the only two that do. And so that needs to change and change quickly. With the exception of the Chicky stuff, a good episode. What did you guys think about this episode of Tulsa King called Warr Acres? Which leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast by the same name. It's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that plays podcasts. We're there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.